This episode of Hoochos is brought to you by Hydroland. Welcome back to Hoochos. Today on Hoochos, we're going to be setting up, growing and time-lapsing one of the most productive systems that I have ever not only designed, but used. This is the Hooch Bucket 2.0. It is a gravity-fed, passive, wicking hydroponic system using 90mm pipe available worldwide, parts that you can 3D print yourself, and cheap media with hydroponic nutrient so that you can grow unimaginable amounts of produce at home. This is the full harvest from a single Hooch Bucket 2. Okay, so straight off the bat, I'm going to tell you the nutrient that I use for this video. It is the Campbell's Diamond White combined with NitroCal at 1 gram per litre, or whatever you need to get your EC up to about 2.6 to 3.0. All of the parts that aren't 3D printable are available on Hydroland, and I'll have a parts list below so that you can fill a shopping basket. You'll also need to print your Hooch Bucket 2.0. So, this is the Hooch Bucket 2.0, a 9-litre Hooch bucket that you can print at home, which will fit over pipes available across the world. So for this system, I purchased a 90mm pipe. Alrighty, there is our length of 90mm pipe, and it has this flare on the end so that you can join two pieces of pipe together without a fitting. So I'm going to cut that off. We are very close to level here, which is fantastic. We're going to get it level, and we're going to cut that end off, and we're going to stick the ends on this pipe. So the hole spacing for this system, we're going to double our usual hole spacing from 300mm to 600mm, which is from 12 inches to 24 inches. These are the float valve parts. So we've got a float end, which holds the float and the float cover, and then we're gonna come out from that, we'll come out 200 because of the size of the bucket, and we're gonna do 600mm all the way down. 600. I'm gonna drill those holes out before I put the end caps on so I can slide out the pieces that drop in. We've got our net cup here. It drops into our print, and the net cup drops down into our pipe like so. This is a 50mm net cup, so it will fit into the hole that this hole saw will make. Okay, I've gone with a 64mm hole saw. That's just going to give us a little bit of extra wiggle room. So starting in forwards to get the center hole, and then we will reverse the drill. So to make this video more succinct, I've actually cut back the setup process. So if you want more in-depth setup information or print settings for these files, head over to the original video, and it gives you a really in-depth setup process. So just out of interest, I just weighed one of these buckets so that I could figure out the cost of the bucket plus the pipe, plus the end caps and all the rest. So the float valve, probably going to be about $3. The pipe's $27, there's $30. The buckets each, if you're getting your filament for $12 a kilo, which I get mine for because I buy it in bulk, $6 per bucket because they're 500 gram plus the net cup. You're gonna have a few other little bits and pieces like the float cover and stuff, the ends, and the hose and stuff. So that's $90 for the pipe and the filament, and then let's just add another $10 for all your other little bits and pieces. Like you probably have hose and piping laying around. You're looking at $100. This was a $100 hydroponic system, and look at how much is here. Now, we've still got to add media and plants, but this is really bloody cheap. We have 100 liters of media, which is 2 of the Hydroland cocoa cubes. So that's $20 worth of media. So $120 gets you the media and the system. This is actually way cheaper than I thought it would be when I was doing the idea in my head. I'm just going to cut out where the float valve sits. So either side of this float valve, and then we'll just follow the holes back to the float. And I've designed this specifically. This is a specific float cover that hugs the contours of the 90mm pipe so that we block all the light from the float. Follow these contours, like so. And we're just going to PVC glue this into place. So PVC glue works really well on PETG filament with PVC. And that just holds out onto our print. I'm going to do the same with the other end. For the other end, we've actually got an extra add-on. I've put in a BSP fitting for this one. This is going to allow us to add a tap to the end, which is going to allow us to drain the entire system whenever we like. So these are available on Hydroland. I'll also put one without this tap fitting so that you can have just a blank end if you like. But this will seal on the O-ring that's around the tap. So you just seal it up like that, and you can leave that on or have it off. And then you just turn the tap to open up the end of the pipe. And I'm just gonna seal it like this to the side so that I can lay it flat. And then it'll just sort of open and close like so. And I'm gonna do the same here. I'm just gonna add that PVC glue all around the outside. Perfect. So there's our ends. And I've actually changed my mind because this is on a slight, like the tiniest slope that way. I'm gonna put the tap at that end. That way it drains down. And also it's gonna be shorter to my reservoir. Beautiful. All right, so I should probably test for fit. Let's see how we go. Oh, how good is that? So our net cup is pretty much flush with the base. Show you it going in, like so. And our bucket is sitting nicely on the ground. How good is that? So I planted all of those plants the other day when I was doing a reshuffling of the greenhouse. Now, just because it's such a lovely rainy day, I'm gonna take this opportunity to plant a bunch of chilies. So these are actually a mix of capsicums and chili. I'm gonna do this for both the Hooch buckets and the Hooch buckets version 2. This 3D printable seed raising technique, wicking seed raising technique is just fantastic. Look at that, like that is a beautiful, happy seedling. Just perfect roots, really great. And we're gonna put him straight in here like so. So the grow media that I'm using here is a hydroponic grade of cocoa, which I have rehydrated with a 1.5 to 2 EC hydroponic nutrient. And this is good because it means that you can kind of stagger your plants' nutrients. I was raising them in those seed raising trays on a low EC, so about a 1. Then when they go into the buckets, the cocoa will be rehydrated with a medium to high EC, so like a 1.5 to 2. And then when I start supplying them nutrients from the reservoir EC will be about 2 to 2.5. And then you can even step it up later in their growth as they start fruiting. So it's like a staggered introduction to nutrients. But before I planted them, I actually gave them a spray because if the prints aren't sealed because of print settings, the water will wick up into the bucket and then down and then start leaking on the ground. So I gave them a bit of a spray with this clear spray paint, right? And what this does is it just makes sure that this is completely sealed internally before I filled them up with media. And the next day, actually, it had been raining and it proved that they were sealed up to the point of the net cup. So that was fantastic. That just means that you won't get any of the water leaking out due to the wicking effect, wicking it over the edges of our rain gutter. So down here, I've got a hose leading back to this 1,000 litre reservoir. So you can literally have this connected to any kind of reservoir. It's a bit of a mess, doesn't really matter. The plants won't care, they grow in soil. So what I'm gonna do is fill this up. I have a float valve on the side here, a high pressure float valve that will take my house pressure just by connecting it up here. I'll turn this off for the minute. We're gonna let that fill up and we'll come back, balance our pH and EC, and we'll add in our nutrients. So our reservoir is full. We're going to be doing a full strength nutrient for the Hooch Buckets 2.0. We're going to be aiming for about 2.5 EC. I'm going to add in potassium silicate to start with. That's going to throw my pH way off. It's going to go to like 9. But this is something you do before you add the nutrient in. You'll bring this back down to what your water normally is with the pH down, and then add your nutrient in and balance from there. 100 mils of potassium silicate, that's going to take us way up. We'll mix that in. We're going to let that sit for a while too, just to sort of get the pH settled, like so. That's risen our pH all the way up to like almost 10, 9.7. Now I'm going to add in some phosphoric acid. I'm going to add in about 50 mils, see if we can get that back down to an acceptable pH. We're at 4.5. So we'll let that settle for a little. So I've settled at 4.8, and I'm just going to add in my nutrients, see what it does to the water. And then, so that was a kilo of nitrocal. And then once it's all dissolved in, I will adjust what I need to adjust. This is a kilo of diamond white. Yep, so we're going down, so I want to adjust that up. So we're at 5.3. Can probably go up a tiny little bit more. I reckon that'll do us. We'll leave that for a bit, just see how it settles. So we're now at 5.5, which is fine. And millisiemens is 2.3. So that's good. I'm happy with both of those. So we can turn that off. Connect up our system. So our glue should be well and truly set here. So I'm going to add it in a float valve, just an arm float like that. So that fits in there like so. Close this up, and we're going to adjust this float valve down. Add in a nipple to the end. So we'll turn on our hose. We're just going to connect this up to our float valve, and that's going to fill up our rain gutter grow system. Well, it has been 10 days since I set up this system and placed the buckets over the top of it. The plants have been growing for a bit longer than that, probably about 14 days since I planted them originally in their buckets. As you can see, our plants are absolutely thriving in our Hooch buckets. The system is performing exactly as I expected it to be completely honest. The plants are looking extremely healthy and they are absolutely powering. You can see I've got some time-lapse cameras here. We're going to do a full time-lapse grow. And will you have a look at that result? What an incredible amount of fruit we have on these plants. I've literally had a hard time keeping these plants from falling over from the sheer quantity of healthy fruit that they have been producing. This whole grow was done over 3 months and 2 weeks. This is one of the best results that I've ever got from not only a system that I've designed, but any hydroponic system. This is absolutely wild. This is more capsicum and chili than I can even dream of eating. And the fact that it's been so hands off, I planted these guys and all I've had to do is come along and string them up to make sure that they didn't collapse under the weight of their own fruit and their own foliage. In some places, I haven't done the best job. These were a lot harder to maintain. These are just bird's eye chilies, I'm pretty sure. They were very hard to string up because they just went in all different directions. And as you can see with the capsicums, we just have a central, like kind of a central stalk that I could string up, and we have this like really nice result up this end. But these long caps are absolutely my favorite cap that I've ever grown. Now, I wish I could tell you what the variety is, but truth be told, I went to a farmer's market and I really liked the look of some of the produce. So I kept some of the seeds from what I assumed was an heirloom capsicum, which it turned out to be, luckily, and I grew them. All right, what I want to do now is I want to do a weigh-in of peppers from one of these plants. So you can see down here, we actually have 2 plants coming out of this one bucket. Now, this actually may be a really good way of doubling down on the amount of fruit you can get, because this has, like, I wouldn't say double the fruit, but it definitely has more fruit than these single plants. So with these spacings, you can have 2 plants per pot. And what I'll do is I'll design a lid so that you can have, so rather than having a single space, you can have a plant on each side, and that is going to allow you to double the amount of plants per pot. And you'll still get like this fantastic result. We're gonna weigh them, then we'll have a look at the roots. So while I'm depeppering them, I want to discuss the time lapse, because what I really enjoyed about that time lapse is how you got to see the peppers mature, like they were literally growing in front of your eyes, and how you got to see them change color as well. It was a beautiful visualization of something that you really don't get to see every day. You can come out and get like snapshots of it, but it was nice to see that color palette, like moving from dark green through black and then into like that brilliant red. Tear my container. This is the full harvest from a single Hooch bucket 2. That is crazy. Look at all those capsicums. Look how healthy they are. It is absolutely fantastic. I'm very excited to see how much they weigh. So this is the double planting. This is not a single plant. This is 2 plants in the one bucket, but it does give you an idea of how much you can harvest per bucket. It's been tared. Have a look at that. So that is 1.6 kilos. 1.66 kilos of capsicum. That is fantastic. And that all came from this one end bucket. That is absolutely wild. What we're gonna do now is we're gonna pull this bucket up and have a look at the roots. So even I don't know what this is gonna look like. I'm expecting that the roots are gonna be quite long. So, oh, that is surprising. You can see there are roots there, but it hasn't needed to explore that channel much at all. And they are healthy roots. That is actually quite interesting. That means that the 9 liters of media in this bucket is adequate to grow 2 whole plants and 1.6 kilos of capsicum. That is very interesting. The fact that they haven't needed to go into the actual hydroponic nutrient. Let's have a look at another one. All right, this one's still got a bunch of fruit on it. We'll have a lift. Oh, same again. Get in closer. Oh, just put it down like that, eh? Same again, I just broke some of those roots because I dropped it in the hole. But you can see there, we have healthy roots coming out there, no doubt. The next logical step is going to be to have a look at the roots in the bucket itself. So we're going to sacrifice these capsicums. Oh, and there's even more capsicums. And we can tip it upside down and have a look at the roots. All right, here we go. All right, that is super interesting. So if we have a look at the roots in this bucket, you can immediately tell we have, well, a bunch of roots to start with. That's fantastic. It's not overcrowded at all. The roots aren't circling internally. This is interesting. There is algae internally on the inside of the pots. That obviously hasn't had too much of an effect because that would just be on the external of the media. But what I would recommend is, if you can, print it in a light-proof filament. Not necessarily black, because the black will heat up in the sun a lot more than, say, a light-proof gray, maybe. Just a more opaque filament. I found that this filament that I've got is extremely transparent. So if you can get a filament that is opaque and blocks the light a lot more. The anoxic zone that I thought would exist does exist. You can see on the side here, we have actually 3 different types of roots. Hydroponic roots reaching down into the anoxic zone here. These, you can tell they're hydroponic because they're like long. They have very few like fuzzy hairs on them. They're literally just pipes that suck up water and nutrients. Down here, it's very hard to see amongst the media, but there's a lot finer roots amongst the media on the top. So it's definitely acting as a dual root zone with the oxygen exchange happening in the media, especially through the filament because it would actually be porous, and the water and nutrient being sucked up by the roots. You can see them sort of like reaching down into that anoxic zone to grab the water and nutrients. Very interesting result. So I want to test the nutrient in the actual system, so in the pipe. Float end, we have a pH of 5.8 and an EC of 2.1 to 2.2. And at the opposite end, we have a pH of 5.2 and a millisiemens of 2.62, which actually means that it's more concentrated up this end. Now, my theory for that is that as the plants strip more water out, they've been selectively using water, it leaves a little bit more hydroponic salts in solution. The plants up this end have actually been doing better. So from that reading, I would recommend that you actually run your systems at a higher EC than I have my reservoir at, which is the 2.2, and run them up towards 2.6, even as high as 3 sometimes, especially for these fruiting plants. However, if you are running a long system like this, that will push up the EC at this end of the system even higher. This actually proves that you can run a full-length PVC pipe and still have the pH and EC within a range that is acceptable. So I'm going to flip this back over and I want to show you the top. Nothing much to see there, but as you can see, there's no algal growth on the top because of our lid and also because of the plant itself shading the bucket. And there you have it. What a fantastic result from an absolutely incredible system. If you do want to create a system like this, you can find all of the print files on my Patreon. They do look a little bit different to how they looked in this video. I've redesigned them so that they are more aesthetically pleasing and more practical. All the parts that you need to build this system that aren't printable are available on hydroland.com, and of course, all of the nutrients, pH adjusters, and tools that I use in all of these videos. Happy hydroponicking. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Hoochos, and I'll see you next time on Hoochos. All right, time for a taste test. Oh. Just like one of the juiciest and flavorful capsicums that I've ever eaten. That's actually incredible.